Hey, what do you think this is? Pong? Ow.
Tron 2.0 is a 2003 first-person shooter developed by Monolith Productions, who are probably more well known for their games like Fear, Blood, and No One Lives Forever. This game was supposed to serve as a sequel to the original film from 1982, but has since been rendered non-canon thanks to a certain Daft Punk music video from 2010. In spite of that, there's a lot of cool stuff to be found in Tron 2.0, so let's see what there is. So because this is a game from the early 2000s, a little bit of maintenance is needed for it to run well on a modern system. The first thing you'll want to grab is the unofficial patch, which expands on the last official patch made nearly 20 years ago. You'll want this patch not only for the general fixes, but because you need it for the killer app mod that improves the game significantly. This is a fan-made mod intended to make the game as good as it possibly can be. Not only does it add widescreen support, it also includes even more bug fixes, adds additional content that was only on the Xbox version, and it restores the multiplayer mode. Once you're in-game, you may notice the mouse sensitivity is too high, even if you turn it all the way down in the options menu. As far as I can tell, there aren't any patches that fix this. Instead, I just manually adjusted my mouse sensitivity to compensate and increase the game's mouse smoothing. So now that we're up and running, let's properly dive into the game and see what's up.
Please, I've got to get back to my routing. I'm already behind on my deliveries this cycle.
You have privileges I require.
I'm just a simple email script. I
know what you are, and I know what you'll become. Tell me, what is your function?
I serve Lord, my master user.
The most 2003 looking guy ever is our protagonist, Jeffrey Bradley, or Jet for short. He's the son of Alan Bradley from the original movie, who himself is reprised in the game by his original actor, Bruce Boxleitner. Jet wants to be a game developer, while his dad wants him to do some more sophisticated programming work for the Encom Corporation. His dad goes missing not 5 minutes into the game, and Jet is digitized into Encom's computer system by an AI called Mathria. Mathria needs Jet's help in fighting a computer virus that's running rampant, so with no other choice, he becomes a useful version of Norton. The most obvious thing when looking at this game is how everything looks like it's from Tron. You have the classic Tron lines over everything, of course, but each stage you go through looks like it could have come from the original movie. It's clear that the developers wanted to try and stay faithful to it, and it shows. Of course, there's a lot of new things here that weren't in the movie, which makes sense as the game is set 20 years later, but there are some throwbacks here and there. Even when judging this as a standalone game, it really sticks out when compared to a lot of other first-person shooters, including ones from today. The levels have a lot of colour to them, with sharp angles everywhere. As you progress, you'll see some more varied designs for each major section of the game to keep things interesting, but there's bright neon colours pretty much everywhere you look. Some of the character designs are pretty much lifted straight from the original movie, but most NPCs and enemies that you see will be new and original, while still looking appropriate to the setting. Of course, this wouldn't be a real Tron game without the appearance of the light cycles, which looks spot on. But there's also a new variant made just for the game, called the Super Light Cycle, which is actually designed by the same guy who made the originals for the movie. All of the effects look appropriate for the setting as well. Almost everything you throw or shoot will have a neon-coloured light trail, taking damage will make binary code appear in your vision, and de-resed enemies will scatter apart and turn into a flash of light. They'll even make the noise straight from the movie. A lot of the sound effects have an electronic or computer-like quality to them, and there's not too many that I'd describe as generic. It all helps to reinforce the fact that you're running around in a digital environment instead of the real world. I mean, even your footsteps have a unique sound wherever you go. This is also prevalent in the voice acting, where every character in the digital world has a voice filter to remind you that they're all virtual constructs.
Waiting on the compiler? Join the club, honey. If you have code to compile, better take a number.
Here's your rod primitive. Once on the grid, activate it to res in your light cycle.
Quick, name the 7th even prime number.
I can't figure it. Unable to...
On the topic of music, all of the game's tracks fit really well for each level. As the environments change throughout the game, the music will adapt appropriately. The tracks in the early game for the regular looking cyberspace areas are fairly reminiscent of the original movie. But the tracks for the internet and corrupted server levels probably stand out the most overall. On the gameplay side of things, if you thought the disc combat in the movie was cool, then you'll get a kick out of its representation in the game. Throw it at something, and it'll come back to you. An enemy throws a disc at you, just block it with your disc. It works well, but you have to be good with your timing here. The enemies can block your disc as well if you throw it at the wrong time, which will then fly off into the next dimension and leave you exposed. But once you get the hang of it, it's great fun. It's also pretty neat to have this kind of unique combat system in the game. Most of your time fighting enemies will be through this exchange of discs, since most of the game's enemies use their own to attack you. There's also some other variants of the disc to switch things up, such as one that lets you throw multiple in quick succession, and another that explodes on impact. There's many other kinds of weapons too, which all look pretty nice. On a side note, I can't help but find some of the weapon draw animations to be oddly satisfying. You won't be able to use these all the time though, because any weapon that isn't the basic disc is going to use up your energy. This basically serves as your ammo, but it's also used when downloading or uploading anything, so you're going to want to keep an eye on your energy levels throughout the game. You'll often find archive bins dotted around the place, which contain things like subroutines, permissions, and emails. Downloading things from these bins will cost various amounts of energy, but it's the best way of obtaining new items, and sometimes it's the only way to make further progress. The subroutines are your special abilities and weapons. You can only have a certain amount of subroutines equipped at once, which is managed via your system memory. Upgraded subroutines will use less memory, so it's all about making the most of your space with the loadout that you want to use. The amount of free memory will change depending on the level as well, such as one set inside of a PDA where you only have a tiny amount to work with. However, your subroutines are prone to corruption either when you get attacked by virus enemies or download dodgy files from archive bins. They will quickly spread to other subroutines in your system memory if they're next to each other. You want to disinfect them as soon as you can, otherwise several of your abilities and weapons will either be less effective or simply not work, which can be a big problem. Sometimes a subroutine will be unusable at first and needs to be ported into your system or defragged before use. These are all really cool gameplay elements that fit right into the setting. The permissions that you run across essentially function as key cards. Some objects like doors or archive bins will have a certain set of permissions that you need to use them. It's another nice idea that fits the setting, but this could be one of the more frustrating parts of the game. There's a good chance that you'll need to backtrack through a level at some stage just to scour for one missing permission so you can unlock a door to proceed further. The last type of goodie to come from the archive bins are the mini emails over the course of the game, but they're not really essential. They mainly function as a way to tell you the backstory and foreshadow some parts of the main story. Beyond all of that, Tron 2.0 features a basic leveling system, where completing objectives and finding build notes will increase your number of build points, which levels you up after getting 100 of them. Once you do that, you can increase your stats like health, energy, weapon efficiency, and so on. A large majority of the game is spent shooting at things as you'd expect, but there are other gameplay sections to break them up. There's multiple platforming sections and a couple of puzzles here and there. Whatever you encounter, just be sure to save, because the autosave only occurs at the start of a level, and some of them can be pretty long, so make good use of your F5 key. There's one last major gameplay element worth mentioning.
Foreign code detected in Arena Sector. Activating Game Grid 1.
The light cycles show up several times in the campaign, but it does come as its own separate game mode as well. However, it's been changed a little to make it more interesting on a gameplay level. You still have the same basic goal of using your jet wall to take out other players, but now there's power-ups, fast and slow zones, as well as arenas that aren't just an empty square. It's good fun, but the enemy AI is notoriously difficult in this mode. They'll make the sort of moves against you that only a computer can do, with your inferior human reflexes unable to keep up. It's often best to just let everybody kill each other first, and then try to block off the last opponent. The light cycle AI is the same for both the standalone mode and the campaign, so be wary. Speaking of the campaign, our story begins with the events that I mentioned earlier. Alan is kidnapped, his son Jet gets scanned into Encom's mainframe, and we fight viruses for the AI Mafria. Jet doesn't get very far before he's captured by the system's intrusion countermeasure programs, headed by a program called the Kernel. Haha, get it? It thinks that Jet is the cause of the virus. He almost gets de-rezzed, but a last-minute intervention by an unknown program sees him sent to the game grid instead. He escapes the endless games of Light Cycle thanks to the help of this program, named Mercury. Her user, somebody known only as Guest, created her to protect Mafria, so Jet joins forces with her. More important events start unfolding from around this point, so skip to here if you care about spoilers. So during the process of rescuing Mafria from the virus, the Colonel decides fuck this and performs a full system reformat. Jet manages to rescue Mafria and makes an extremely narrow escape from the big red reformat wall. Mercury doesn't make it though. RIP. After the escape, Jet finds himself on his dad's PC. It's here that we learn a rival company known as FCON is in the process of taking over Encom. While we're here, we also...
Still intact. I'm sorry about revealing the correction. I had no choice. Tron Legacy. Lost to find it.
Guest, who are you? Do you know an Alan Bradley? He works in...
User connection terminated. Sorry, Jet. The link with gas test is broken.
Tron. That was a program my dad wrote years ago. But what's Tron Legacy?
You've gotta be kidding me. Well, at least this saves some valuable thinking time for the name of a movie sequel. Anyway, this becomes Jet's new goal. So after travelling through several other computer systems, including the original 1982 Encom mainframe, Jet obtains the Tron Legacy code, which is an updated version of the original Tron program made to protect Mafria. The duo then travel to the magical place known as the Internet to compile the code. It's here that we can actually learn the truth about Mafria. She was created by Laura from the original film as an assistant AI. However, Laura was killed in a lab accident, but part of her DNA might have actually been integrated into Mafria. This also explains why she has the same voice as Laura, since the developers got her actress Cindy Morgan to voice Mafria.
You'll need to protect me from the ICPs while I finish reversing the defense protocols. Use the data stream to enter the control tower. Eliminate all ICPs that approach our location.
Anyway, the reason Jet and Mafria went to the internet is to compile the Tron Legacy code, which turns out to be the biggest mistake since someone decided to let Chris Roberts on Kickstarter. Mafria is transformed into a godlike cyber thing that's hell-bent on killing all users.
Jet, run. The legacy code has changed me.
Whoa, keep your head on, computer lady.
It turns out the code was meant for killing every rogue user in the system. Whoops. Jet escapes via Light Cycle, and Uber Mafria gets captured by FCON. However, in order for Jet to escape back to the real world, he still needs Mafria's help. So the mysterious user Guest, who's actually Jet's dad Alan, sends him another copy of Mercury to help out, before Alan himself gets digitized into the system by FCON. He and Jet go to the source of the system's virus, which is the corrupted server of Encom security chief, Thorn. It turns out that Thorn was working as a corporate spy for FCON, so he knows where Mafria is. After helping the ICP to clean up the server, Jet finds Thorn with the Colonel, who's about to de-res Thorn on the spot. Instead, Jet does this to the Colonel in a 1v1 with discs only. Thorn tells Jet that Mafria will be on FCON's dedicated server, but it's not easy to get in. After some more running around, Jet breaks through an elaborate firewall and finds himself on the server. It's here that we learn what FCON is really up to. They've created a force of mercenary users to steal or destroy valuable computer data on a global scale, among other devious plans, but all you need to know is that FCON are pretty much looking to dominate the world. Jet then literally crashes the server, with no survivors. But as he's doing so, FCON sends some of their head honchos into the digital world to stop everything. Unfortunately for them, Alan briefly removed the algorithms that are needed for this to work perfectly, so they all end up as some kind of digitized abomination. As Alan and Jet enter the digitizing beam to return to the real world, the Xbox mascot reject chases them into it. After a tense final boss battle, the father and son escape, and the FCON team is trapped on a portable drive. Roll credits. So that's it for the single player. When it comes to the multiplayer, the game has 3 different modes: Light Cycles, D-Res, and Disc Arena. But it goes without saying that you're probably not going to find anyone else online playing this in current year. If by some chance you and a buddy both have the game, then it's great fun to give the multiplayer a whirl. Each game mode works fairly well and doesn't seem to have any real issues from what I noticed. You can customize the settings to change things up and keep it interesting as well. The light cycles are still my favourite here, but there's no bots in the multiplayer version. Unless you download some custom maps which can support them. However, some of these maps can be downright bizarre, so your mileage may vary. And with that, I think I've covered just about everything. This is one of those games that was sitting in my backlog for almost a decade. I honestly wish that I'd played it sooner, as I had a blast. It's a fun game with a great setting, and a lot of excellent ideas thrown in to make for one of the most unique first-person shooters I've played in a good while. Would I recommend this? Absolutely. If you've enjoyed Monolith's other shooters but haven't played this yet, then I reckon you should. I'd even say to give this a go just for the sake of how different it is when compared to most other FPS games. If you want to grab it for yourself, Tron 2.0 is available on both Steam and GOG. So that's all for now. I'll see you next time for another review. Until then, take it easy.